What's up, guys? It's three-time NFL Pro Bowler, all-decade return specialist, Josh Cribbs. I want to welcome you to the College Sports Connection podcast, where AA Alex and AJ host the Mid-American Conference Best.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the College Sports Connection podcast. I'm your host, Alex the Captain. Joining me, as always, it's AJ the Guru.
What's going on, everybody?
AJ, this week we have a pretty big special guest. I'm really pumped for this one. This week we've got a former All-MAC offensive lineman, played multiple years in the NFL, most of his time with the Cleveland Browns, was drafted in the third round by the then St. Louis Rams. This week, we bring in Toledo offensive lineman, John Greco. John, thank you so much for joining us.
Guys, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be with you.
Wait, thank you for taking the time. Last weekend we talked a little bit off air, getting to meet you at homecoming, you and your quarterback, Bruce Gradkowski. Talk to us a little bit about homecoming, coming back as an alum, as a former player. You get to see your picture on the concourse. It has to be a pretty cool feeling coming back and watching the Rockets win.
Absolutely. And I don't get it back as much as I would like to. We went back for the anniversary of our 2004 MAC championship game. This is my teammate reminded me that in 2 years it'll be the 20th anniversary of that. So my guess is that we'll all be back for that again. But it was great, and I got to see Bruce, and I stay in touch with Bruce. I see him quite a bit, so it's sometimes too often. And I got to see Anthony Jordan, who's a Columbus guy with me down here. So I see him a little bit, and our teammates and guys that we ran with in with our time at Toledo. So that was nice. But just coming back, guys, to be honest with you, I've tailgated 2 times in the last month, and that's 2 more times than I have in like 25 years. So I'm officially a fan. I love it. It's great getting back to the Toledo games, and as the weather starts cooling off now, it just gives me all the football vibes, and I love this time of year. So it was a great experience to go back with my family.
A little bit different being on that side of the game day experience, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm used to, you drive in and you typically get to the stadium about 3 hours before kickoff. That was kind of the sweet spot. And, you're on the bus and you're going to these road games and you're seeing these packed tailgate lots, and you're just like, your stress level is starting to increase because, you have the game in a few hours here, and you just see all these people setting up and having the time of their lives and enjoying their Saturdays or Sundays. So I was a little bit jealous of that I was a lot jealous of that for many years. So now I get to experience that, and I'm really enjoying it.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. So let's go back to your pre-Toledo days. Obviously, you grew up in Youngstown. You got recruited by Tom Amstutz at Toledo. What other schools did you kind of have offers for? Who was looking at you? Kind of talk about that journey to get from Youngstown to Toledo.
So things were different then. I don't know how many stars I was, if I even had a star. But
Clearly 5 stars, right?
Yeah, of course. So I feel like recruiting has changed a lot, and it's way more competitive. I think back then, you jumped off the tape, recruiters came to see you, everybody knew. Now there's so much exposure. So my point is, growing up, going to Boardman High School, we had a terrific team, and we had several guys getting recruited by Division I schools. Both of our tight ends went to play Division I. Our one tight end went to OU. Our other one was a 4-year starter at West Virginia. Our center was a 4-year starter at Georgia Tech. The tackle that was a year before me was a 4-year starter at Wake Forest. Our quarterback played semi-pro. He went to Youngstown State. He played semi-pro in Italy for a number of years. Both of our running backs went Division I. We had a couple guys on defense play at YSU. So we had a really talented team. So we had a lot of exposure. There's recruiters coming in to visit, pulling us out of class and talking with us. So that was a really cool experience. But kind of as my senior year approached, I was getting letters from Notre Dame and Clemson and all these big time schools, Big Ten schools, and it was a lot of excitement. But those guys weren't really calling or visiting. It was more of the MAC schools for me, and then some smaller schools. So really, for me, Bowling Green actually stood out, and they were the ones that were I would say most aggressively recruiting me at the time. And I really, really liked my recruiting coordinator. He was the tight ends coach at the time, and he and I talked weekly, and I was really excited. And then I'll never forget this. Urban Meyer was the head coach at that time, and my mom and I went to a game, and obviously she didn't go into the locker room with me afterwards, but I did. And Urban, I'm not going to sit here and trash him, but my recruiting coordinator introduced the two of us, and like he didn't even look at me, and kind of gave me a kind of a hey, you're kind of wasting my time handshake. And I was like, that didn't really make me feel too welcome. And I was like, is this going to be my experience for the next 4 or 5 years? Is this guy going to be here? And turns out he wasn't. So that just kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. And I don't really remember the timeline, if it was like directly after that or around that time. But then Toledo, like out of nowhere, started recruiting me. And same thing, it was Chris Hedden, who was the tight ends coach at the time. He started reaching out, and I was just like, hey, Toledo wasn't really after me for the longest time. And I knew Chris Tuminello, who was a starter there at center, and he was an academic All-American. His brother, Kevin, was the guy that went to Georgia Tech. So I played with him. He went to my high school. I had kind of a familiar face there at Toledo. So I was like, maybe I'll give this a shot. Not to mention my uncle, Don. He was a math professor at the University of Toledo for like 40 years. So I had some familiar faces there, and I was like, let me give these guys a shot, just because they weren't talking to me at all, when all of a sudden they were. So my mom and I went on a visit. We fell in love with the campus, met everybody. The coaches were great, and the rest was history. So I committed with Coach James. That's my official visit. I had a meeting with him and told him I'd love to be a part of it, and the rest is the history.
Sure. You talked about playing high school ball in the Youngstown area. Can you talk about how competitive a high school football area that is? Because when you have Youngstown, Cleveland, Akron, Canton, I mean, the talent, the hotbed talent in that area is just it's unmatched in the country, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And you heard me comment about the talent that we had, and unfortunately for us, we couldn't. Warren Harding at the time had Maurice Claret, who we all know was the star Ohio State running back, and helped them win a national title. So he was in our division, and we just did not have the perimeter speed to contain him. We were more built just trenches, 2 tight ends, fullback, tailback, old school, like 1945 football, where we just had these big giants and at every position, but we weren't going to spread you out 5 wide and attack the field vertically. So every week it was a battle. We had a few layups here and there early on, but everybody in our division, Austintown Fitch, who's still a really, really good school in that area, and like you said, Canton, we would play Massillon, Massillon Jackson, Massillon Washington, North Canton Hoover. We played the Cleveland schools. We played Cleveland St. Ignatius. It seemed like maybe 3 of the years I played. So it was a very competitive schedule, and you had to battle. So like a 6-win season was good, and it chances are it got you into the playoffs. We played Youngstown Mooney, Youngstown Ursuline. So these were kind of historic powerhouse high school football programs that we got to face every week, and there was littered with college talent on all of those teams. So it was very fun to grow up in that environment. And I still try to keep a little bit keep tabs on it today. But being down in Columbus now, obviously I get to watch these guys play.
And Columbus itself, I mean, what a great area with a lot of amazing football talent, right? So for you, that's really cool that you got to grow up in a state like Ohio, where football is just king. Everybody loves and lives and breathes it. So let's go to Toledo. You get there, you arrive on campus. You're teammates with guys like Bruce Gradkowski and Lance Moore. You win a MAC championship, and then you guys actually played in the inaugural MAC championship game at Ford Field. How special was that?
Yeah, it was a great experience. I redshirted, which was, I think, for an offensive lineman, unless you come out and you're just an absolute monster, I think that redshirt year is so valuable to, grow in the weight room and kind of get used to the speed from high school or college because it is a big difference. So I redshirted. It was a great experience. I got to have fun, get my kind of feet underneath me in the classroom and everything, and figure out what was going on in the field. And as a redshirt freshman, starting next to a fellow redshirt freshman, David Perkins, on the right side, we didn't really know what was going on. It was just like, hey, let's just go out there and be in survival mode. At least that's the way I felt, because our left tackle at the time was Nick Kaiser, who was had some great accolades and played in the NFL and won a Super Bowl with the Patriots, maybe two. So I just remember looking up to him and being like, man, I want to be like this guy someday. So we had Bruce Gradkowski, which obviously, you saw when he left, that was the last time I won. So he was everything. He steered the ship. He was the fire. He had terrific, supporting cast. But without him, I don't think we ever win that. Go to those bowl games or win that MAC championship. So yeah, it was fun. We had I had to look back. I was looking through this the week about just the teams we played. This was a long time ago, and I have kind of a foggy memory of a lot of those games, but I do remember that MAC championship game and losing to those guys earlier in the year, and then coming back and kind of getting payback and winning it for the big one. But playing at Ford Field was a lot of fun. I remember thinking, hey, this is the NFL stadium. I hope to be playing in these someday on Sundays. So it was a great experience.
Mm-hmm. So you talked about coming in as a freshman. A while back, we had Jared Pugsley on he played at Akron. And I asked him about his transformation from his senior year of high school to freshman year of college and on physically. He said he cut all this weight, got big. He wasn't eating like a high school kid anymore. He wasn't training like a high school kid anymore. What was that training regimen like for you, and what transformation did you see in that year to 18-month period?
It's huge, and I commented on it a few minutes ago. I think for me, looking back, I wish I would have taken high school, the weight room, a little bit more seriously. I was a multi-sport athlete, so I was kind of like, well, it'll figure itself out. It'll work itself out. But when I got to Toledo, it was a rude awakening. And I joke with people. Steve Murray was our strength coach at the time, and he was exclusively football. And he was an Army guy and really short, kind of stocky dude, and he had the buzz cut, and he was a nut job, but he was such a terrific leader and motivator. And you could tell the coaches were like, listen, it's your job to mold these guys into football players. And he did it. And I bought in, as a lot of the guys did at Toledo, and he helped me transform and really set me up for success in my time at Toledo. So it was a big change. It was a big wake up call. And, I would just say the speed is so much different. And, when you're in high school and you're the big man on campus and you're, pushing everybody around, and then one or two games, you might be like, oh, this guy's going to be a college talent. I got to strap up and bring my A game here. Well, then you go to college and everybody's like that. And then there's a handful of guys. These guys are NFL talents. I really have to ramp it up and ratchet up my game a couple more notches to prepare for that. So, it kind of like iron sharpens iron. And if you're competing against, top level talent day in and day out, which I was at Toledo, that just helps you get better. And if you're going against somebody that you're throwing around all the time every day and he's not getting you better, and then you go to a game and you're playing a Big Ten talent or somebody that's elite pass rusher in your conference, you're going to be a step behind. So that to me was the biggest difference in training and getting ready and preparation. And I credit Steve Murray, the strength coach at the time for the Toledo football team, with a lot of that.
Sure. Can you talk to us a little bit about that freshman camp? You kind of come in, you're learning a new playbook. I can imagine it's like you're obviously the new kid on campus, new kid in the classroom. You talk about learning that offensive playbook, learning the routine of being a college athlete, how much of a transition that was for you?
Yeah, it was, steep learning curve. Rob Spence was our offensive coordinator at that time. And my freshman year, my true freshman year where I redshirted, was very bizarre. And I didn't agree with it at the time. You were just kind of like, okay, I'm going to do what I'm told. But during position meetings throughout the week, me and the other redshirt freshmen were not allowed to sit in the meeting rooms, which made no sense to me. Because I was like, you would think we would just be tucked back in the corner and just observing. So that made it difficult for me going into my second year. But kind of getting back to your question, in high school, you don't really have a playbook. You're just kind of like, hey, here's line up and run toss this way, run ISO this way. Here's this pass protection. You have this guy. So that was a big learning experience. And our offense wasn't overcomplicated when I first got to Toledo, which I think was a big reason for our success. We just had good players, and they were like, "Hey, let's just go play. If the defense gives you this look, run this look. If the defense gives you this, run this way." So I think Bruce was smart enough to where he was getting guys lined up and orchestrating everything. So for me, it was just about like, okay, what is this protection? This is a zone protection. This is a man protection. What is this play called? So I caught on to that pretty quickly because it wasn't that complicated. But I would say the biggest difference is just going from kind of winging it in high school to like having more structure and an actual, phone book style playbook in college.
So talk about, obviously, your sophomore year, you made a transition to left tackle. I'm very unfamiliar with blocking schemes being an offensive lineman. I'm clearly not built like an offensive lineman. So can you kind of talk about the differences and the nuances from going to left tackle and guard and all of those things?
Yeah, I mean, the obvious thing is just your stagger of your stance, which with hands on the ground if you're a 3-point stance team. The footwork's obviously different, but the main thing obviously that you put your two more reliable pass protectors on the left if you have a right-handed quarterback to protect his blind side. That's kind of the obvious thing that everybody knows. So for me, when I switched over after Nick Hazer retired, I remember that camp we had a new offensive line coach, Mike Devlin, who was an NFL pedigree guy. He played for a long time. He kind of like had a similar career as me. He played center and guard in the NFL, played like 10 or 12 years. And then he got into coaching, and he was using Toledo obviously as a stepstone to get back into the NFL. And he was really, really a terrific offensive line coach. And I think, like I was saying, I was behind. You would think I had that first year to know everything and just be an easy transition into the starting role. But Mike helped me. He really had to rattle my cage a little bit to get me going. So moving over from right to left, it wasn't a huge transition. I feel like I'm kind of the guy. I'm the kind of guy that's just like, yeah, let's just roll with it. We'll figure it out as we go. And I did that, and that's what you did off-season 4 to get that footwork down. And for me, I played left in high school, so I was familiar with it. And like I said, it's just it's as simple as just changing your hand, your footwork, and everything. But at the same time, if you're a team where you have a really talented guard and tackle tandem, you're going to be running that way a lot. So you have to be great with your combinations, your footwork, and you have to build that chemistry with the guy next to you.
Sure. Now, you played in some pretty epic games during your time at Toledo, specifically the great rivalry, the Battle Live 75 with Bowling Green. This was back when Bowling Green was a divisional opponent and not just a conference opponent. How cool was that for you guys to kind of go 3-1 during your time while you were playing? But also, how cool is that for you to get the opportunity to prevent them from going to a MAC championship, as well as obviously securing the victory over your rival?
Yeah. It was big, and I didn't realize that the rivalry at the time growing up. I was unaware of it, but as soon as you walk on campus, that is like pounded into your head, and you are very much aware that game is circled on the calendar and how much it means and the impact it has. So and I remember the upperclassmen who had lost to Bowling Green at the time, and they were kind of on their way out, and you could tell how important it was for them. So you kind of had the mindset that like I don't want to screw this up for those guys because that's going to be me someday. So that was always on your mind, and it was like the other schools just kind of existed, but Bowling Green was the one that you had kind of bullseye on the calendar. So yeah, 3-1 against them, that was big. Um, and especially since I felt kind of slighted by them, maybe just in my mind, but that I could have gone there, and who knows how things would have worked out. So I was happy I made the right decision, but that's kind of how it operated.
Did you have any stadiums or max stadiums that you had that you just really love to play at aside from the Glass Bowl? We've had Tim Lester on, and he talked to us about playing in the Rubber Bowl and how great of an experience that was. I know Mike knew over at Ball State when he was playing, he loved playing at Schumann Stadium. So were there any stadiums in the MAC, maybe even not MAC, that you really loved playing at and you'd love to play at a few more times?
Yeah, I have a memory of playing at OU. It was like a Tuesday night, and we had a really good team, and it was on ESPN, and I remember like the whole week there was so much bulletin board material how they couldn't wait to out physical us, have us come into their house, and the crowd was supposed to be amped up. And I remember we went there, and going into these road games was the most fun for me because you show up, there's you have some fans there, but really nobody cares about you there. So you're there, and it's just you guys against everybody else. And that was a great feeling for us. And I remember the night before the game, Mike Devlin, I'll talk about him again. He was just like, listen, these guys don't respect you. He was doing his job and getting us fired up. And we went out, and I don't remember the game vividly, but I remember we had kind of a rocky start where we might have gone 3 and out or had an early turnover or something, or they scored early. Something happened which kind of put us behind the 8 ball a little bit. And then I remember we got settled in and just destroyed them. And it was one of the coolest things because all of the noise surrounding that week, how they were going to out physical us, how they were the better team, how they couldn't wait to come in and knock us off, and we just shut them down. So that was a fun environment. It was really kind of an electric environment. And then we had that goofy game in Northern Illinois where you couldn't see the field, where it was like really foggy and it looked like something out of like a Stephen King novel. I remember on TV they couldn't. The analysts couldn't, the broadcasters couldn't call the game because you couldn't see. And even standing on the sidelines, you could barely see the guys. You just saw kind of a blur. So that was kind of a unique. That was something that I never experienced. So playing in that stadium, I would say Northern Illinois, Bowling Green was always kind of a good atmosphere. That OU game, those were the three that would off the top of my head that I could think of.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned playing on Tuesday night. We had talked to Coach Lester from Western a while back, and he talked about how hard it is to coach and prep for a Tuesday and Wednesday night game from a coaching perspective. Now, how was it from a player perspective? Because I mean, that kind of throws off everything essentially for a month.
It was a lot different for me and players. The coaches I get, and probably the same goes for the NFL with the Thursday night games and having the quick turnaround. But for the players, it was like a mini bye week. You'd play Tuesday, and then you'd play the following Thursday, and then you wouldn't play till the following Saturday, and then you play the fall. So it kind of chopped it up, and you were missing class, and you were playing, and then you got to enjoy your Saturdays. You were able to watch the rest of the nation play. And you were riding high because you just had a win or whatever. So I enjoyed them. I didn't mind them at all, and I like it now, especially being a fan, because it gives you a chance to watch football almost every day during the week. With the Monday games, you got Tuesday and Wednesday action, Thursday night football, and then obviously Saturday and Sunday. So I was all for them, but I could see where coaches would hate them from a logistics standpoint.
Sure. I mean, you were early on ESPN Maction too, and in that point, Toledo was playing on ESPN a lot. How fun was that just being able to play, knowing that your family can watch you from anywhere in the country, and you can be on TV and put a show on and put Toledo on the map.
Yeah, it was great. Early on, it was a big deal, and then as time went on, I don't want to say it ever loses its aura, but I'm kind of jaded. I played a long time, and it is what it is. But back then, it was a big deal. And it gave the nation a chance to watch, the Rockets. And at the time, we had a really high-powered offense, and we were a team that was winning a lot of games. So it was fun to say, "Hey, listen, let's crack this top 25, and let's give these voters and these coaches and these people a chance to see us play, and think, hey, those guys in Ohio are they're playing well."
Hmm. Now you had just kind of side note here. You played with Scooter McDougal, right?
Yeah,
He was always some fun dude to watch too. And so I was going through the lineup of that roster, his name popped up, and I go, I remember watching this guy. It was because of that Maction. He was a fun player to watch.
he was terrific. Kind of built like a Steven Jackson type player, where I don't. He was probably 6 foot, maybe just under, but big. 240, and he can move. And he was tough to bring down. And I think things. Obviously he passed away. And I think he went through some tough times, but he was a player that I thought would have been a surefire Sunday player.
Hmm.
But he was a great guy, and I loved having him as a teammate.
Sure.
So let's talk about your bowl games. Toledo, while you were there, they went to 2 different bowl games. They went to the GMAC Bowl and the Motor City Bowl. Obviously, 1-1. You lost to Connecticut in the Motor City Bowl. Now, did you guys get any really cool bowl gifts or anything like that? We did have Chris Wormley on this show a couple years ago, and he talked about they would get a bunch of different bowl game gifts. Anything like that for you guys at the time? Or is that something that's kind of a little newer?
Our budget wasn't, probably what it is today back then. And I remember we got killed by UConn. Now, it was such a bad game. We were riding high off the MAC championship win. And I ended up matching up against a guy, I forget his name, but he was this giant defensive end that was like injured the entire year. And then he came back for this game. And he was like a preseason Big East or whatever conference they were in player. And I was like, oh, who is this guy? And I remember my coach like, listen, this guy's pretty good. We're going to try to watch some tape from, September. Sure. And that was a tough game for me, I remember. But the gifts, I don't remember what we got that year. I don't think it was anything spectacular, especially with, you heard me talk about it earlier, my high school teammates. I was comparing whatever we received to what they were getting. Sure. And of course they were getting, my buddy at West Virginia, I'll never forget, he played when, Steve Slayton, Pat White, Pat McAfee, those guys were on the team. So they were really good. They were ranked in the top 5 to 10 at the time. And they were getting Xboxes and, all this Nike gear and, phones and all this kind of stuff. And we were like, we got like a Craftsman like multi-tool or something. But the next year in the GMAC Bowl, we got this is showing you how old we are. They were camcorders, and they were like the ones that had the flip open screen. And guys were so excited. Everywhere you went that entire week, people were just filming one another. Awesome. So that was a lot of fun, and we got payback that next year. I remember going into that GMAC Bowl prep, it was like these coaches, we are not losing this game. Like you could tell, like we had curfew every night. It went from like, hey, let's just go down, let's just go up to Detroit and have some fun, and we'll see what happens, to no, we are winning this game, and we are winning this game big. Mm-hmm. So you could definitely tell the coaches were not going through that embarrassment again, and neither were the players. So that it was funny how that changed from year to year.
And that's when that game was in Mobile, Alabama, right?
That's Mobile, Alabama.
It's now what? I think the Dollar General Bowl or something like that.
Who knows? Yeah, it changes.
It keeps changing hands.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I think it was the GoDaddy Bowl at one point. It was
Yeah.
kind of Ball State lost to that a couple of years, or when I was in school. That changes every couple of years, but money talks. So might as well get your name on something, right? Get the John Greco Bowl next.
Yeah, right.
So you finished your time at Toledo. You were 3-time All-MAC honoree. Your senior year, you were a 3rd-team All-American by Rivals. Now, this is the stat line that sticks out to me. 3 sacks allowed in only 411 attempts. That's impressive. I don't care who you are. Obviously, that puts you on the radar for the NFL scouts, specifically St. Louis. Talk to us about that a little bit. We've had other guys who have gone to the league, who have done things through different paths, and their journeys have all been really unique. I'm sure it was a lot different then than it is today. Did the school help with like an agent, with kind of making contacts? Did you have to do that yourself? What was that process like?
Yeah, so just talking quickly about agents. Bruce's agent and my agent my whole career kind of met me after I forget what game it was, but they were calling you and sending you letters and getting a hold of you. It wasn't that hard, and those guys found a way.
Sure.
But I remember interviewing a handful, and I went back to my agent Greg Daulis, who was with DeBarlo Sports at the time. Well, he was with Ralph Sindrich, which was a successful agent for a number of years, and then they were either purchased or merged with DeBarlo Sports, who was trying to get into the sports and entertainment industry at the time. And they had deep pockets, which was nice. They got to see some good perks with that. But Greg just kind of started visiting me after games, and we'd catch up. And then it was like, hey, let's get coffee, let's get dinner, let's grab lunch, let's grab breakfast, let's just get to know each other. And for me, it was like, if Bruce trusts you enough to work with you, that's good enough for me. So that was kind of an easy transition for me. But getting ready for that every year, like I would say after my second year of starting, the guy that recruited me, Chris Head, and he and I would have private conversations all the time because they wanted me and they expected me to be a leader, both on the field and off. So, he and I would talk and he'd say, hey, listen, he was pushing me. You need to work hard. You need to keep this going. Don't be content. Don't think you're at the top of your game. Because, he was you could, if you play your cards right, you have a chance to play at the next level. And I remember like being like lit up about that. And then that conversation after my, the next year turned into, hey, listen, you're going to be playing next year, but what does that look like? Are you going to be a free agent? Are you going to be a draft pick? It's up to you. Ball's in your court. And then going into my senior year, it was like, listen, you want to be a first rounder? Do you want to be a second or third rounder? Do you want to, it's up to you. So that was kind of my motivation and how things progressed. And I just remember, I never really got it, let that affect me. It was just like, go out and have as much fun as I can, work hard and try to win games. But remember that it's kind of a game within a game, and there's individual battles that I needed to win. But obviously if I was doing that, the team was having success. So that was kind of my mindset, and kind of the rest played out.
Sure. So when your coach told you that you have the opportunity to play the next level, was that the first time in your mind that you thought, oh, I can actually play the next level? Or did you think that early on at Toledo?
That was kind of the first time when he told me after I don't remember exactly when it was. It was in my like redshirt sophomore year. So my second year of starting. At some point during that season, it was just kind of like, if you want to play at the next level, like something like that. And I remember thinking, wow, no one's ever said that to me. And I guess I've never really thought of it, that I had that opportunity or chance, or I was good enough. Mm-hmm. And then once that was in my head, that's what I was constantly chasing. So that's kind of how that played out. But yeah, I just needed to hear that almost. That was kind of the fuel for the fire.
Sure.
I was just going to say, did Toledo have a pro day back then? I know a lot of schools do like their own pro days before the combine, things like that. Was that something that you participated in, or was it just the NFL combine and that was kind of it?
No, when I did our pro day, I ran the 40 at our pro day because I remember them saying, they take the fastest time. It's not that, oh, he didn't run that at the combine. They take the fastest time, and we ran the 40 on a like at the in the ROTC building, like on like a track. So I was like, obviously I'm going to be faster in this, So I didn't bench. I put up a good number. I put up good numbers at the combine, but I remember my 40. I was just like, I feel like I could run a better number. Which did that matter in the grand scheme of things? Probably not. Where people are like, oh, he ran about 40. I don't think so. But for me, it was just nice to be like, okay, I put up a better number. That's what they're going to see. So yeah, we had a pro day, and we had some guys that participated in that pro day. And there was a lot of exposure there. Chris Hopkins, our tight end at the time, who I thought would have been a combine invite, but he participated at our pro day, and there was I bet there was like 6 or 7 guys that worked out that day, and there was a lot of teams there, so I'm sure everybody was happy.
Mm-hmm. So you ended up going 65th overall to St. Louis. Was St. Louis ever on the radar? Was that kind of a surprise? Did you get a phone call, maybe the week or two before the draft saying, hey, you're going to be a Ram? How'd that process turn out for you?
So when you're at the combine, you're interviewing with these teams, and everybody has like a laminated lanyard, and you look on the back. And I remember nobody knew what was going on; they don't tell you anything, and you're just kind of like amongst other offensive linemen, and the whole first day is just meetings at tables. So you're kind of walking around. It's like a job fair, like a networking night. You're just kind of like meandering around, and everybody's like nervous, or if you're a surefire first rounder, and those guys were walking around with their chest inflated, and it didn't matter to them. But for the rest of us, it was just kind of like, what do we do? And I met with my agent, and he was like, just you be you. And I remember taking that advice, and they were like, your tape speaks for itself, and just go and be, you be you in these interviews and these meetings. So what I was saying about the lanyard, you look on the back, and there was like, some guys had 8 teams, some guys had 1, some guys had none, some guys had 6. I remember having about, I don't know, 5 or 6 meetings. And I remember meeting with the Rams, the Colts, the Vikings, and the Cowboys. And I think I had 1 or 2 more, but those were the ones that stood out to me. And Dallas's offensive line coach, you were in this hotel room, and it was me and Dallas's offensive line coach. At the time, it was Dante Scarnecchia. And he had a dry erase board, and they wanted me to play center. So he was like, draw out this defense, here's this protection, shift these defenders around, what's your call? And I remember I struggled with that because I never played center. So he wasn't like, oh my God, you're wrong. But I remember thinking, well, I'm probably off their list. And I met with Indianapolis, and there was their team psychologist, which was unique. So she was asking me questions that had nothing to do with football. And I was like, this is really weird. And I did that. And then the Rams, I remember it was everybody. It was the head coach, the offensive coordinator, the GM, the offensive line, maybe the offensive line coach, if I just said that. And I want to say like the quarterback's coach. It was a really busy room. And I remember thinking like, whoa, this is different, and they were all just kind of drilling me with questions. And I was like, I left that meeting. I was like, man, I just killed that interview, and who knows if that was the reason why. But then you leave and you're like, man, this is the first time I have like a break, and you kind of clear your head. But on draft day, you have no idea. And back then it was different. They did the first round. They did the first round, I think, or first 2 rounds on the first day. I can't even remember, but I remember my agent saying, "Hey, look, if you're gonna, there's a chance you could be second round. First round's probably out of it. A lot has to go your way if you're going to somehow creep in there. Somebody's really going to have to fall in love with you." He's like, second round, maybe. But he was like, just go out and have fun. It was like that Friday. It was like that Saturday night, and he was like, just go out and have fun. Don't worry about it. He's like, if it happens, great. If not, don't set any too high of expectations. And I did that. I went out with my buddies, and we had a blast. And then we had a party set up for Sunday because we were like, we'll either be celebrating, and I'll be an early pick, and it'll be the day after, or we'll be watching it on TV all day. And I remember we were on our way to the place we had rented out, and I got the call that it was the second pick of the day. So it was an early call. It was great. There was no stress, and we were able to just enjoy ourselves the rest of the day.
Mm-hmm. So you came in too with Chris Long, right?
Yeah. He was the second overall pick with the Rams, and then our second rounder was Donnie Avery, who was a receiver at Houston, and then me. So we had a nice class, and then we had a kid from, I'm trying to think, we had a receiver from Kentucky, Chris King, who is or Justin King, who is a corner at Penn State. Roy Schuening was our 5th rounder. He was a guard from Oregon State. So yeah, it was a fun class. We had a lot of fun.
Yeah. And I mean, to see the career, like Chris Long had, a long, successful career. What was that first mini camp like? I mean, you two are battling, I'm sure, day in and day out, whether it's in the weight room or on the field. I can imagine, knowing who his dad is, how competitive of a guy he is. Did you see that first day and was like, okay, this guy's gonna make me work day in and day out?
Yeah, absolutely, and not just him. It was the other guys on the team. Leonard Little, who won a Super Bowl with the Rams, was still on that roster as defensive end, and Leroy Glover, who played a long, long time and won a Super Bowl. So there were some veterans in that room that were helping Chris, and they were making life miserable for me during that camp. But yeah, that Chris and I are still good friends, and getting to play against him. At practice every day. And then obviously when he and I went our separate ways, I played against him a lot. When he was with Philadelphia and I was with the Giants, obviously in our division. And, it was fun, but he was a terrific player when he played.
Sure. And you had, was it Trent Green and Mark Bulger in the quarterback room that year?
Yeah. So 2, veterans, and Mark Bulger was one of the funniest guys. That I had ever played with. Kyle Bowler was on that team too. I don't know if you guys remember him, but yeah, Trent was he was outstanding. I mean, obviously he had a successful broadcasting career. I think he still does it for CBS. But just being in the locker room with those guys, and it's like, man, Mark Bulger. It's just this guy was part of the greatest show on turf after Kurt Warner left. Seeing those guys play and hearing how they prepared, and I was used to a great quarterback with Bruce, but seeing that at the next level then, and how good those guys were at preparation and what they knew, it was really impressive.
So obviously you spent 3 years with St. Louis. I'm sure you loved every minute of it. Then you find out you're getting traded to Cleveland. What is that experience like? We see it all the time on TV shows, things like that. They say, come sit down, son, you're getting traded to Cleveland. Was there any indication that was coming, or what's that process like for you?
I'm sure if you had 50 different NFL players that got traded on your show, you'd have probably 40 different stories. Mine was a unique experience, and so I was I got tendered. So they gave me a tender offer, and it was during the lockout. So I remember that was a crazy year. The CBA expired. They lifted the lockout last second. Then it was like, are we striking, or are they locking us out? And then they put it right back on. So that was a unique off season. And there was something in the rules that once everything opened back up and we went to camp, that anyone that was a free agent, had to sit out of the first 10 days of camp. And I remember thinking, that's awesome, and I was kind of going through the motions. I was sitting in meetings. I was at practice during that training camp. And it was, honestly, this is how it went. I was in the car going back to, I was leaving the facility, going to the hotel, getting ready for meetings. And I got a call from kind of a weird number, I got a call from my agent, and he was like, hey, he's like, you've been traded. And I was like, what? We're out of nowhere, and at the time you're like, I'm heading to one of 31 other cities, or, I could be heading to any state, any city.
Right.
And I was like, well, to who? And he was like, the Browns. And I was like, oh man, that's awesome, And then Billy Devaney, who was the GM at the time that I had a really good relationship, I turned around, went back to I kept going to the hotel because that's where we were kind of set up and had all the meetings and everything. And I met with him, and I remember I went back to the facility, and Steve Spagnuolo was the coach at the time. And I remember kind of meeting with him and saying goodbye. And that was kind of like, okay, see ya. But Billy Devaney, I remember he was like, John, this is going to be a great opportunity for you. He's like, we loved having you here, but it just, it's best if we go our separate ways. And I respected that, that he had that meeting with me, and he was like, "This is going to be a good opportunity for you moving forward," and it turned out to be great for me. And Pat Shermer, who I played with for 3 different organizations, who just got the Cleveland head coaching job, obviously brought me over there. So that was fun. And then honestly, guys, I went back to my place, grabbed. I lived with a buddy at his house. I grabbed whatever I could. I put it in my car and I drove to Columbus that moment. I left half the stuff in the house, and I was just like, they'll figure it out. They can have it. They can throw it away. I don't really care. But I drove to Columbus that night.
Wow.
And met with some buddies and had fun. And then I went to Cleveland the next morning.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
That's
So
awesome.
like I mentioned to you this past weekend, I'm a Cleveland guy through and through. So I have a laundry list of Cleveland questions, but I'm not going to get into all of those because we're not going to do that. I don't want to relive some of those things. But nevertheless, you come into Cleveland, and that offensive line room is very underrated. I mean, you have Alex Mack, Joe Thomas, Pinkston, Lavino was in there. You talk about the experience, kind of going into that room for the first time and just kind of getting to know the guys. I'm assuming it was a learning curve, not coming to a new organization, but meeting new players and new guys who you may never interacted with before.
Yeah, obviously I knew Joe Thomas and Alex Mack by name. I knew they were Pro Bowl players, and Joe, in Wisconsin, and if you're an offensive lineman and from Ohio, you envy offensive linemen from Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of like the pinnacle of offensive line play if you grew up in the Midwest or Northeast. So I was excited, and at the time, oh gosh, his name, Peyton Hillis was on the Madden cover.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, oh, and he was just coming off like that 300-yard rushing game. And I was like, man, this is going to be sweet. Like, this is going to be a really good year for offensive line play. And the coach there, George Warhop, I would put him in probably my top 2 coaches I've ever played with for. And I could just tell right away how important technique and details were to him and that room and accountability. So that was a big difference, a big change coming from St. Louis to Cleveland. And that was what made us so good as a unit. But obviously spent 6 years there, had a blast, played with those guys a lot, didn't win a lot of games, but really had fun and became a good offensive line.
Sure. I assume this is correct, but is Joe Thomas at school as advertised?
Yeah, yeah, he is. Funny, always joking. He looks a lot different now. Obviously, he kind of looks like maybe a wide receiver or somebody that was in like Mr. Olympia or something. But from the time I got there, he and his wife, they were always great to us, and we're still friends today. I go up to his farm up in Wisconsin every year, and his kids are similar age as mine, so we stay together, stay in touch, but yeah, he's what you see on social media and on TV and with him talking, that's him, that's authentic.
Now, like I was a lineman growing up, and you were able to play with 2 of my all-time favorite offensive linemen, and that is Joe Thomas and Orlando Pace. So you get to play with the Big Go towards the end of his career. I wanted to go back to him here. Did he teach you like the art of the pancake block? I mean, what did he? I'm assuming that he's a wealth of knowledge that I think nobody else in the world has when it comes to the offensive line position. I can imagine he knows some things.
He taught me how to. He knew how to spend my money. Let's say that. He was Big O. I still see him in Columbus occasionally, just randomly. But he was great. I remember thinking, like, my God, this dude was a Heisman finalist as a lineman, which I don't think you've seen that since him. So that was really cool. There were some big names on that team when I was there. Torrey Holt and some of the guys we talked about earlier. But yeah, Orlando was, he was battling some injuries as he was late in his career. And I think at that time, he was kind of he knew he was on his way out, and he was just like, I'm having fun. So we had a lot of fun. His locker was next to mine. I was in between he and Alex Barron, who was the other starter at the time. So those guys, they were like, hey, listen, you got to go buy this. This better be in the room tomorrow. Hey, you're buying dinner tonight. Hey, we're going to grab steaks. It's on you. Set up this limo. You do this. So, and that taught me how to be a rookie and what veterans do. And I carried a lot of that over to Cleveland. And some of those things are still used today from what Joel Batonio tells me. So, Orlando was a really fun guy to be around, and I remember losing a lot of games of horse to him in the gym, and losing a lot of money betting him. So it was fun, but it was great being with arguably the two best guys at their position to ever play the game.
Sure. Now we talked about you playing center earlier on. Alex Mack broke his leg in, was it 2013, I believe it was, and you had to fill in.
Yeah.
And you had to fill in for that. What was that transition like? I mean, playing college center is different than going to the NFL, I can imagine.
So I never played center in my entire life
Okay.
until that day. And we rolled really dirty in Cleveland when it came to offensive linemen. We dressed 6 sometimes. So, I mean, think about it. You know, 2 guys go down, you're pulling a tight end in. And Joe, obviously, we know his streak of plays, and at the time, Alex had a similar streak, and Mitchell Schwartz had an unbelievable play streak. So we had like Iron Men type players, and the coaches rolled the dice and played dirty and said, we'll dress an extra skill position player, somebody for special teams, a defender, keep those guys fresh because we knew the offensive line was going to be okay. So I may have had 2 or 3 center snaps a week in practice, maybe. And out of nowhere, it's like, holy crap, Alex just broke his leg. Like, and then everybody's like screaming at me, get some snaps, with the quarterback's running over. And I'm just like, holy crap, this is it. And the first play, we were playing Pittsburgh, the first play they did it's called cross dog, where the linebackers cross and like an X pattern on a blitz. And we picked it up and gashed them. And I remember thinking like, okay, now it's just get the ball to center, and this is just like guard. So I feel like that was a kind of trial by fire, and I liked it. I wish I played center my whole career, but that's kind of how that day went.
Sure. So was that Jason Campbell or Brandon Wheaton, the quarterback that day?
I don't remember that specific day. It might have been Jason Campbell. I don't remember.
You had a list of them that you played for. There were quite a few in Cleveland.
Joe and I used to joke. We had a notebook because obviously he played for one team. There was a time where we were trying to figure out how many owners, head coaches, GMs, offensive line coaches we had played for, and my list was longer than his. He had a longer quarterback list, but I wasn't too far behind him. But I shattered his records. It was only the second team I was on, and I shattered his record for ownership, GMs, head coaches, and offensive line coaches.
Right.
It was kind of funny, but yeah, I don't remember if it was Jason or that game.
And now, when you came in though in 2011, they were going through an ownership change, right?
Yeah.
That's right.
The Lerners sold the team.
Yeah.
And obviously I went through that in St. Louis too. When oh my God, the Rams, I can't think of his name.
Kroenke, right?
Stan Kroenke, yeah. When Stan Kroenke bought the team, so seeing that, and you don't have time to worry about what that's going to mean for you or for anybody else at the time. But yeah, when Mr. Haslam and Dee bought the team, I remember going through that and just seeing the changes. So yeah, there was a lot of change.
Sure. Then you had Chud that 13-year. He seemed like a very offensively minded guy at that time. What type of energy was he in the locker room? Was he a guy who had a potential to be a really good head coach, or was he just one of those coordinator guys who were just really good at calling plays and getting guys where they needed to go?
No, I think there was a lot of guys that I played for in Cleveland that if we had more stability at the quarterback position, they would probably still be coaching or still be head coaches somewhere else. Chud was great. Obviously, Pat Shermer was great. Those are offensive-minded coaches, so it was a lot better playing for an offensive head coach. And when Mike Pettin was the head coach, obviously defensive minded, so it was like the offense was never winning a practice. It was always the defense, and if the defense played well, they were popping champagne bottles. If the offense somehow won the practice or had a better day, it was like everybody paid the price. So that was kind of the difference, and it just seemed like if it was a defensive coach, they hated offensive linemen. But if it's an offensive coach, they took care of you. So, but you were talking about Chad. I like Chad. I thought he was a good offensive mind, and we scored a lot of points that year.
Sure. How cool was it signing a 5-year extension?
That was big. It just kind of took a lot of the pressure off. I knew that I was going to be there for a while. I loved it there. My wife loved it. Obviously, we're close to home. Every week, people were coming to see me play, and it was really a lot of fun. So that's kind of what you want. You want to lock up that long-term deal. That way, you're just like, now that's just one less distraction. Now I can just go to work and play football.
Sure.
So there were some other MAC guys in Cleveland during your time there, notably Josh Cribbs, Reggie Hodges, Andrew Hawkins, guys that we've all come to know, and we know specifically because of the MAC. Did you form any kind of bond with those guys coming from the MAC as well, and just kind of talk about sharing that path with them, going from being MAC guys to now NFL guys? Was there kind of a fraternity of that with you guys?
Yeah, there is. And I think that goes across the league. Guys that you never met, and all of a sudden you're just like, hey, I know you from playing, like Julian Edelman. I know you from playing in the MAC, and you're just kind of burned because of it. But you mentioned Andrew Hawkins. He and I were Toledo teammates. We're still friends today. He's absolutely killing it with everything he's doing. I see him a lot. I talk to him a lot. Reggie was just a terrific person in general. I don't care where he played. He was just such a great guy. And being the punter, I feel like offensive lineman and specialist always kind of naturally gravitated toward one another. Obviously Josh Cribbs, who was, I think will probably make the Hall of Fame someday. I think he should. He was such a terrific special teams player, and just kind of a great guy, and for everything he did off the field, and for the city of Cleveland, and for his hometown and everything, just a great person.
So were you in Cleveland when he had those 2 punt returns? Was that in Kansas City? I think it was.
That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a wild game. Kansas City's, between them and Seattle's the 2 loudest crowds in the league. And I remember, like, you could hear a pin drop when those were happening. So that was kind of a nice experience. But yeah, he was when Cribbs got the ball in his hands, there was no telling what was going to happen. It was really fun to watch.
So you finished your career obviously at the Giants, but then you transitioned into doing stuff with the Browns radio network. How did that happen? What was the conversation to go from, hey, I'm going to stop playing football, to now I'm going to work with the Browns radio? I mean, that had to be a great opportunity for you.
Yeah. I was up in a suite watching the Browns game, and with some friends, and Andy Baskin, who does the afternoon show on 92.3 The Fan, walked by, and he and I had a good relationship. I had done their show, and he's interviewed me, and he was like, hey, what are you doing here? And I'm like, I'm just hanging out. I'm a fan. And he was like, are you done? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, oh, I would love to have you on the show. And I was like, yeah, sure. Why not? I love doing things like this and just like little radio hits. And then the Browns heard that and were like, hey, are you done? Are you open to doing something with us? And I said, yeah, absolutely. What does that look like? And at the time I was driving up once a week and doing Browns Daily, which was like, I forget, but like on YouTube, and you could hear it on the radio and everything. So I had fun because a lot of people listened to that, and I had guys asking me, hey, I loved what you had to say, and it was a lot of fun.
Sure. Yeah, that's what, the Browns Daily, I mean, it's turned into Bo Bishop and Zagura. Those guys do a phenomenal job. That's when I listen to weekly, after games and whatnot. And I think the Browns, having replaced Doug Deacon this past year with the Zagura, I think he'll fit in perfectly with you having, because I don't get the games here in Indiana, so I've listened to them through their app, and he does a phenomenal job.
Yeah, absolutely. Nathan and I go way back. He got hired when I was playing, and you can always count on him to know some obscure stat and numbers. He's the numbers guy. So Doug Deacon, obviously, that's a talent and somebody that you can't replace. And I think that they did a terrific job at not trying to bring in the next Doug Deacon, because that I don't think that would have worked. Because a lot of people thought, is it going to be Joe Thomas? Is it going to be me? Who's it going to be? Is it going to be Cribbs? I think the natural next progression would have been a former player, but I think they hit it out of the park with Nate, and he's such a bright mind for football and numbers, and he knows things about the game from talking with players and from being in that building for so long. And then obviously Jim Donovan's the goat of all goats when it comes to broadcasting. So they've proven to be a terrific team.
Now, was there any conversations for you to take over that position?
No, which is funny because there was rumors. I had people come up to me like, "Hey, I heard you're going to step in," and I was like, "News to me. I don't know, unless you're sitting there talking with the radio executives or the media executives, this is news to me." So, no, there was never any conversation about that. It was just kind of me behind the scenes, just kind of continuing doing the pregame or what that was going to look like for me. But like I said, it was an unfortunate thing for me that I had to kind of step away from that just because of what I do now and just family stuff. It was just too much of a commitment.
Sure. I mean, I've gotten into radio. I do high school athletics here in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and doing radio is the best.
Yeah.
It's so much, but it's so fun.
Yeah, I enjoy it. And now I'm on Ken Carmen's show on 92 Through the Fan with Anthony Lima on Tuesdays. And that's a lot of fun because I can go in there, I can say whatever I want. They love it. I could have hot takes. I could be edgy, but all while being respectful because I played ed for Cleveland. So I don't want to sit there. I'm never going to trash them, but I can be honest, which is nice. And, you don't have to tiptoe any lines. You could just be honest, and I think they like it because it's a fun show, and I get to kind of spit some knowledge and all while having fun, and that's what it's all about. For me, it was never I never wanted to. It wasn't a career path that I wanted to pursue. It was more of just like for fun and for a hobby, and I will continue to do as long as someone will have me. But that's kind of the way that keeps me connected with the game.
Sure. And it's so funny you talk about being honest and whatnot on Cleveland sports radio. The honest people are the best because it creates the best content. Because I love it when ESPN Cleveland on Twitter or the Browns guys. It's some of the funniest stuff, but it gets everybody engaged in everybody's opinion. And whether it's way over here or way over here, it's always fun to pay attention to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think now that the Browns are relevant again and competitive, and they won a playoff game against the Steelers, and I think that just that screwed things up for fans because now that they expect that every year, and they should. I mean, they have a talented roster, and I'm hoping that they can keep things together until Deshaun Watson comes back and try to make a run at this thing. But yeah, it's a fun time to be a Browns fan.
Sure. I mean, heck, I'm 30 years old and they've won 2 playoff games in my life. I didn't know how to act, so I get it. I understand. And I have a good friend of mine who plays for the Steelers, and so I really didn't know how to act. So it made for a fun time, though.
Right.
So as we're kind of winding down here, I wanted to touch a little bit more on Toledo and the MAC really quick. This is the question we ask everybody. What does it mean for you to have played in the Mid-American Conference, and specifically at Toledo? And what advice would you give somebody listening who might want to try to pursue an NFL career down the road?
Well, I think you're seeing now that it doesn't matter what school you play for. If you develop and work hard and kind of keep the blinders on and just always get better and never think you're reached the top of your game. If you're always trying to get better, I don't think it matters where you came from. You see MAC guys on every NFL roster and a lot of guys that are contributing at a high level. Obviously, if you go to Alabama, if you go to Ohio State, that there's a lot different resources into getting you to the next level, and there's a different talent pool that they're pulling from. But you could be a guy that, like for me, I don't want to say that I didn't take high school seriously, but I played multiple sports, and I was just like, okay, hey, great, I got a scholarship. I'm at Toledo. Let's figure it out. I guess my point is you don't have to have the whole world figured out when you show up to your freshman first day and you're 18 years old or however old you are, you have time to develop and get better and improve. And that was my mindset, and it worked out. Is it going to work out for everybody? Probably not, but you're going to have a heck of a lot of fun throughout that path.
Perfect.
Hey, that works for us. John, thank you so much for joining us today. Tremendous honor from you to us. For me being a Toledo guy, AJ being a Cleveland guy, great to have you on. Thank you so much for all the stories.
Yeah, guys, thanks for having me.
Thanks so much, John. You have a great rest of your day. All right, AJ, that was a lot of fun having John on, talking Toledo, talking the NFL. I learned a lot that I didn't know about that time period of playing in the NFL and in the MAC.
Sure. I mean, you kind of look at the people he played with. He listed off a bunch of great names from college and the NFL, and people who's interacted with post playing. He's been around it all. He's seen it all. He's played with the best of the best. Played with two goats. I mean, I don't think you could ask for much more in a career.
Not at all. Not at all. Well, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. We really appreciate it. Go check out our website. We've got some updated blog stuff. All the photo albums are up to date, so go check those out. Faith did an excellent job for us over the month of September, getting some great photos. And AJ, from one co-host to another, she's done nothing but improve, and it's great to see for her.
Absolutely. It's made our jobs a lot easier. It's
So-
given us a lot more content, and it's been a good time.
Oh, so much easier. And that's what, we love. And so guys, thank you for tuning in. You can follow AJ at Roughing55 on Twitter. You can follow me at ashear90 on Twitter, and keep checking us out on our own Twitter at College Sport Pod. We're inching a little bit closer to that 1,400 follower mark, and we appreciate every single one of you.
Yep, absolutely.
So thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we will see you next week.
See you.